Child sexual abuse is traumatizing. In these cases, there is an additional layer of trauma because the abuse came at the hands of their spiritual leaders. Months old.
Detailing child sexual abuse within the Catholic Church. Today, the grand jury released its report into 6 Catholic dioceses. 6 News is looking into the investigation report and how church communities within our area have been impacted by alleged abuse. So far, we have found 12 clergy members who served in our region who are named in the report. All of them so far in the Diocese of Erie, which in our area encompasses Cameron, Clearfield, Elk, and Jefferson counties. We want to tell you about a number that's been scrolling at the bottom of your screen for much of the broadcast. This is the number for the Pennsylvania Attorney General's Clergy Abuse Hotline. If you are a victim or have information about abuse, call this number on your screen. You can dial this right now, 888-538-8541. Today's report is eerily similar to a report released more than 2 years ago. Decades of widespread abuse, authorities say, was covered up by leaders within the Diocese of Altoona-Johnstown. And our Maria Miller covered much of those stories for years, and she joins our coverage tonight. Maria?
Well, Jen, it's truly hard to believe that nearly 3 years have now passed. You may remember back when that investigation, the report was released, it never mentioned Brother Stephen Baker. It's likely because he didn't work underneath of the diocese directly. But then Attorney General Kathleen Kane made it clear that the allegations against him were likely the basis for the investigation into the Altoona-Johnstown diocese and the turmoil that followed. It was 2009 when officials within the Diocese of Youngstown, Ohio, said they started receiving allegations against Brother Stephen Baker. About a dozen men at first came forward saying the Franciscan friar, coach, and athletic trainer would molest them while giving massages in the late 80s. There would be settlements, but never any charges. Fast forward to 2011, more allegations, this time in Johnstown. Now men who were just boys in the late 90s and early 2000s when they say Baker abused them at Bishop McCourt Catholic High School, where Baker also served as an athletic trainer. Baker would later take his life in 2013 when even more alleged victims came forward. That's when the investigation into Baker's abuse, who knew what and when, exploded.
Where were the supervisors? Why weren't they properly supervising?
Everybody knew what was going on, I think, and when individuals did report it to the school administrators or teachers, they were simply told, oh, it's just bro, don't worry about it.
The investigation transgressed beyond Bishop McCourt and the Hollidaysburg Friary that oversaw Baker. A statewide grand jury began its investigation into the diocese and in 2016 named about 50 priests and religious leaders accused of sexual abuse against children for decades. The investigation also uncovered tens of thousands of secret archives and allegations of a pay scale, a detailed chart of how victims were paid in exchange for their silence.
Duration of abuse over time, the age of the victim, the use of alcohol or drugs, apparent effect of abuse on the victims, their psychosis, and other aggravating circumstances.
A little more than a week after the report was released, 3 friars who oversaw Baker were named and charged. And just this year, 2 of them, Robert D'Aversa and Anthony Crisatelli, were sentenced to probation for failing to properly supervise Baker. They're not the only ones who were taken to court. 2 years before the report was released, a Somerset County priest was charged with abuse and later convicted in federal court. Father Joseph Maruzio was found guilty of abusing young, underprivileged boys overseas during mission trips in Honduras. His name would be mentioned in that 2016 report, and he would be sentenced the next day to spend nearly 17 years behind bars. Maruzio remains in a federal prison in Ohio today. Since that 2016 report was released, dozens of alleged victims have come forward. 6 News has spoken to many of those people throughout our region the past couple of years who they say were abused by priests within the diocese. And at least one of them made that trip to Harrisburg today to stand behind Attorney General Josh Shapiro as he announced the latest findings. And they were also included in an extremely emotional video.
This is a lifelong issue with survivors. This is one of the proudest things I've ever done in my life. Speaking about your abuse is a very important step in the healing process.
Now that's Sean Doherty. He's been a familiar face here on 6 News the past couple of years in stories and in panel discussions speaking about the abuse he says he suffered by a priest named in that report 2 years ago. The Johnstown native and others just like him say today is just another beginning. It's a step in the right direction, even though their fight is not over yet. And even though the report 2 years ago revealed widespread abuse, some alleged abusers have already died. And for others, the statute of limitations had run its course, meaning that there was legally too much time between when the abuse happened and when it was revealed. They say likely that's the scenario in many of the cases that were presented today, and it's what Doherty, other advocates, and some lawmakers are still trying to change. Jen?
Maria, thanks. Statute of Limitation reform has been at the forefront of just about every diocese-related story we've brought you over the last couple of years. And tonight, Johnstown attorney Michael Parrish joins us. And Michael, you're very familiar with these types of reports and allegations. You've represented dozens of alleged victims in the Altoona-Johnstown diocese, and there continues to be a clear plea from those victims and Pennsylvania's top cop himself today.
Sure. Yeah, I think you've heard today from the chief law enforcement officer in Pennsylvania calling the law as it exists today weak and asking for a change. You have a 23-member grand jury panel who spent 2 years of their lives listening to the interviews and statements of dozens of witnesses, looking at 500,000 documents. They're calling for a change. It's pretty clear something needs to be done.
Now, we know that we just heard from State Representative and House Majority Leader Dave Reed late this afternoon, and he says there will be a vote on this fall. Are you optimistic about that?
I'm optimistic, but there are certainly challenges ahead. There are going to be constitutional challenges to this law. Anytime that there is what's called a look-back provision, where there's an attempt to modify a statute of limitations retroactively, you have constitutional challenges. So I think there is, there's a great deal of work ahead.
Now, you've spoken with a lot of these victims. Do you think the climate is finally changing, that more needs to be done?
I don't know how the climate can't be changing. I mean, in this report, we have seen 1,000 victims, maybe more, 301 known perpetrators, only 2 of which are going to suffer any type of criminal indictment. There is evidence in that report of cover-ups, intents to outweight the statute of limitations. I'm not sure how you could be against some type of change to that law.
I know that you saw the fallout from the 2016 report. What do you see happening next? What do you see looking into the future?
I think we're going to see a great deal of debate at the legislative level. I think that we're going to see discussions on both sides and points on both sides about the constitutionality of such a change.
Attorney Michael Parrish, thank you for giving us your unique perspective, coming in and talking with us. I'm sure this won't be the last time we hear from you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Again, we want to remind you that today's report is nearly 900 pages long with responses from those named. It's more than 1,300 pages. Parts of it, though, are redacted, meaning parts are taken out. If you look at it, you'll see words that are covered in black, like this. In fact, some entire pages are blacked out. These are the portions currently under review. They're portions where people identified have filed petitions to keep their names out. Attorney General Josh Shapiro said today these blacked out portions prevent from telling the entire story. He says his office will continue its fight to make sure the redactions are removed. You can see that full report for yourself in its entirety on our website, WJACTV.com. There, you'll also see a complete list of those clergy members named today and their responses, as well as a list of their assignments. All of it available right now if you log onto our website, WJAC.